wasteland of limited representation. Then came a Saturday morning that would change everything forever. Don Cornelius, a Chicago journalist turned visionary, understood that representation wasn't just about being seen, it was about being celebrated. Soul Train wasn't merely a television show, it was a cultural thunderbolt that would electrify an entire generation. Picture the scene. Families gathered around television sets, breath held as a train of rhythm, style, and unfiltered black excellence rolled into living rooms across America. Each week, the show defied expectations, transforming from a simple music program into a weekly ritual of empowerment. Young Black Americans no longer saw themselves through the distorted lens of mainstream media. Instead, they witnessed a vibrant, dynamic representation of themselves. Talented, beautiful, and unapologetically proud. Don Cornelius understood something revolutionary. Culture is not just observed, it's experienced. Soul Train became more than entertainment. It was a moving, breathing testament to Black creativity, a platform where music, dance, and identity intersected in the most spectacular way possible. From the moment Cornelius's rich baritone welcomed viewers aboard, something magical happened. Every dance move was a statement. Every performance was a revolution. Soul Train didn't just reflect culture, it created it, week after electrifying week. Before Soul Train, television was a barren landscape where Black stories were either invisible or grotesquely misrepresented. Don Cornelius was not a man to accept such limitations. Born in Chicago's South Side, he had witnessed the vibrant culture that mainstream media consistently overlooked. He wasn't just a television host, he was a cultural architect designing a new vision of Black representation. Imagine a young Cornelius, burning with frustration at the narrow narratives surrounding Black communities. Crime, struggle, and stereotype. These were the only stories television seemed willing to tell. But Cornelius had a different story to share. With the precision of a surgeon and the passion of a revolutionary, he began assembling a team that would challenge every existing narrative. Black professionals were hired not as tokens, but as essential creators of this new vision. Each Saturday, Cornelius did more than introduce performers. He proclaimed a manifesto of dignity and excellence. His iconic baritone wasn't just a voice, it was a declaration. When he introduced an artist, he wasn't merely announcing a name, he was elevating an entire culture. Soul Train became his canvas, a weekly broadcast where Black talent wasn't just displayed, but glorified. From camera operators to talent bookers, from dancers to musicians, every person involved was part of a larger narrative of reclaiming identity and celebrating excellence. The music swells, the crowd parts like a living, breathing organism. Silence falls, and then magic happens. The Soul Train line was never just a dance segment. It was a sacred space where ordinary people transformed into legends. Close your eyes and feel the electricity. This was more than movement. This was storytelling written in the language of body and rhythm. Imagine a shy teenager from South Central Los Angeles. Weeks of practicing dance moves in bedroom mirrors culminating in this moment. The lines stretched before them, a gauntlet of creativity, a corridor of pure possibility. Some dancers arrived with elaborate props, others with acrobatic skills that defied gravity. Each step was a declaration. Here, everyone has a story. Here, everyone can be extraordinary. This wasn't just dancing, this was visual poetry, a weekly ritual that democratized performance in ways no other platform had ever dared. Michael Jackson didn't just learn the robot here. He discovered a language of movement that would revolutionize pop culture. Breakdancers found their first breaths of inspiration between these lines. Every Saturday, unknown teenagers would step into that corridor and emerge as potential icons. The Soul Train line became a cultural institution, a place where individuality was not just accepted, but celebrated. It didn't matter if you were a professional dancer or someone who had practiced moves in their living room. In this space, your passion was your passport. Creativity knew no boundaries. Talent had no prerequisites. This was a place where dreams didn't just live, they danced. Before Soul Train, national television was a fortress with carefully guarded gates. Emerging artists struggled to find platforms that would showcase their raw, unfiltered talent. Don Cornelius changed everything by creating a stage that was more than just a performance space. It was a cultural launching pad where musical legends were born. Picture the anticipation, the studio lights warm, the audience electric with expectation. Aretha Franklin doesn't just enter, she commands the space, her voice a hurricane of emotion that could shake studio walls. Stevie Wonder doesn't merely perform, he transforms. The entire concept of live music, improvising melodies that seem to come from another dimension. The Jackson 5, with Michael as a young prodigy, didn't just dance, they redefined what performance could mean. These weren't just musical acts, these were cultural moments being etched into collective memory. Artists came to Soul Train knowing this was more than a television show. This was immortality. Every performance was a declaration of identity, a statement that said, "This is who we are. This is our music. This is our moment." Imagine the pressure and the privilege. One performance on Soul Train could launch a career, could transform an unknown artist into a cultural icon. Cornelius understood something profound. Music was more than sound. It was story, it was identity, it was revolution. In a world carved up by rigid racial boundaries, Soul Train was a radical act of defiance. It wasn't just a television show, it was a social experiment that challenged every existing narrative about inclusion, representation, and cultural boundaries. Cheryl Song's story epitomizes this revolutionary approach. As the show's only Asian dancer, she wasn't a token, she was a trailblazer. Imagine the skepticism she faced, the whispers, the doubts. But on the Soul Train stage, talent spoke louder than prejudice. Week after week, she danced with a precision and passion that made her integral to the show's fabric. When white artists like David Bowie were invited, it wasn't a calculated move to chase trends. It was a profound statement. Talent recognizes no color. Excellence transcends division. In the Soul Train universe, everyone had a story. Everyone could shine. Don Cornelius didn't just open doors, he demolished walls. Each episode was a powerful demonstration that culture is not a zero-sum game. By celebrating diversity, Soul Train showed that representation isn't about replacing one narrative with another. It's about creating a space large enough for every story, every style, every voice. Before Soul Train, fashion was a language spoken in whispers by mainstream media. But on that iconic dance floor, fashion became a thunderous declaration of identity, resistance, and unbridled creativity. This wasn't just clothing, this was armor, a visual manifesto of Black excellence that would reshape American style forever. Imagine the transformative power of a single outfit: bell-bottom pants that seemed to defy gravity, platform shoes that turned every step into a statement, medallions that glinted like personal trophies of cultural pride. Each ensemble was a carefully crafted rebellion against a world that had long tried to dictate beauty on its own narrow terms. Teenagers watching at home weren't just seeing clothes, they were witnessing a revolution stitched into fabric, a bold reimagining of what style could mean. The fashion of Soul Train was a complex language of self-expression. A sequined jacket wasn't just a piece of clothing, it was a proclamation of confidence. A bold pattern wasn't merely a design choice. It was a middle finger to conformity. Every color, every cut, every accessory told a story of reclamation. These weren't just outfits designed to be seen. They were manifestos designed to be remembered. Don Cornelius understood something profound. Fashion is never just about what you wear. It's about who you are. It's about declaring your identity to a world that might prefer you to remain invisible. Soul Train turned living rooms into runways, transformed dancers into style icons, and proved that true fashion is about authenticity, not just trends. Every legend has its twilight, and Soul Train's decline was as complex as its rise. The musical landscape was shifting beneath their feet, a tectonic cultural change that would prove challenging even for a show that had once defined an entire era of entertainment. Picture Don Cornelius, a visionary suddenly finding himself on unfamiliar ground. Hip-hop was erupting, a raw, unfiltered voice of a new generation. But Cornelius, for all his revolutionary spirit, struggled to understand this new musical language. The very audience that had made Soul Train a cultural phenomenon was now turning away drawn to newer, edgier platforms that spoke their evolving language. Competing networks like BET and MTV emerged, offering shinier, more aggressive platforms that seemed to capture the zeitgeist of a changing musical world. Soul Train, once the absolute pinnacle of musical and cultural representation, found itself struggling to remain relevant. It was like watching a revolutionary become slowly obsolete, unable to adapt to the very change it had once championed. The Milli Vanilli scandal became a metaphorical punctuation mark to this decline. A performance that promised authenticity but delivered nothing but fraud. It was a painful microcosm of the challenges facing music entertainment. For a show built on genuine talent and cultural authenticity, this moment was more than a setback. It was a fundamental challenge to everything Soul Train had represented. Some moments define an era. The Milli Vanilli scandal was one such moment, a cultural earthquake that would shake the foundations of musical entertainment and deal a particularly devastating blow to Soul Train's legacy. Imagine Don Cornelius's face when the truth emerged. Two performers who didn't even sing their own music, who had built an entire career on manufactured authenticity, had performed on the very stage that had always celebrated genuine talent. This wasn't just a musical scandal. This was a fundamental betrayal of everything Soul Train had stood for. The show had always been about authenticity, about real musicians, real dancers, real culture. Milli Vanilli represented the antithesis of everything Cornelius had built. Their performance wasn't just a moment of entertainment, it was a symbolic corruption of the very principles that had made Soul Train sacred. For a show that had spent decades celebrating genuine black talent, showcasing real musicians who poured their souls into every performance, this moment was devastating. It wasn't just about two fraudulent performers. It was about a changing entertainment landscape that seemed increasingly willing to prioritize spectacle over substance. Some departures are more than simple exits. They are the closing of entire chapters, the final bow of a cultural movement. When Don Cornelius stepped down in 1993, it wasn't just a host leaving a show. It was the end of an era, the dimming of a light that had illuminated black culture for decades. Picture the moment. Cornelius, standing alone, delivering his iconic sign-off. Love, peace, and soul. Those words were more than a goodbye. They were an epitaph for a cultural revolution. His departure wasn't just personal. It was symbolic of a broader cultural shift that was rendering Soul Train increasingly irrelevant. The show tried to continue. Other hosts attempted to capture the magic, to recreate the alchemy that Cornelius had perfected. But something fundamental was lost. Cornelius wasn't just a host. He was the heartbeat, the very soul of the production. His vision, his voice, his understanding of cultural representation had been the show's true engine. Without Cornelius, Soul Train was like a body without its heart. The rhythms continued, but the spirit was gone. It was a painful demonstration of how deeply one visionary can be intertwined with a cultural institution. Legends never truly die. They transform, they evolve, they become part of the very fabric of culture itself. Soul Train wasn't just a television show. It was a cultural blueprint that would reshape entertainment, music, and our understanding of representation for generations to come. Look around today. Every music video that celebrates black excellence, every dance challenge that erupts on TikTok, every moment where unique cultural expression is celebrated. These are the living descendants of Soul Train. Its DNA is embedded in the very way we understand performance, representation, and cultural celebration. Decades after its final episode, people still speak of Soul Train with a reverence typically reserved for religious experiences. It wasn't nostalgia. It was recognition of a profound cultural moment that had fundamentally altered how we see ourselves, how we celebrate diversity, how we understand the power of cultural expression. Soul Train was more than entertainment. It was a movement, a weekly revolution broadcast into living rooms across America. It said, loud and clear, "We are here. We are beautiful. We are powerful. And we will not be ignored."